Hello everybody. If you've played Don't Starve in any extent for the last decade or so, you might have happened across the caves. Within those caves, you might have also happened across a place known only as the Ruins. A place steeped with some of the strongest items and biggest dangers found in the game. But have you ever stopped to think what these ruins actually are? Who lived this far underground in a world that already seems so make-believe? Ever thought about what these weird statues represent, and maybe even wondered what significance the lunar archive holds within all this? Well, today I hope to explore the history of the ruins, the civilization that lived there, and the significance they hold in the entire world of Don't Starve itself, as well as who exactly Mephius was. Or should I say, is. It's time we look at the rise, the fall, and the rise once more of the ancient civilization. Long ago, in a place where time is immeasurable, lived a civilization of bug-like creatures, who most likely resided on the surface of what we now know as the Constant. However, their time on the surface was short-lived. Famines and other unpreventable measures forced the civilization to look elsewhere for their survival, and with the two then leaders of the species taking the charge, the one bearing the cane and the other bearing the torch, they went deeper to the caves below. Typically a place more barren than the surface, the travel to the caves was most likely an act of desperation rather than one of choice, but this was exactly what the civilization needed. Among the caves they happened across a miracle, a round, pronged gateway looking thing that functioned as a connection between one world and another. What was this gateway? Who built it? And where even does it lead? Keep those thoughts in mind since it's crucial that we come back to them later. With whatever power this gateway contained, the cane bearer was able to activate it and harness the gift they were granted, creating bounties of food, gemstones, and mechanical components that they would later fashion into automata, and even the ability to create guardians of bone and shadow. It sprung life back into a race of species that almost couldn't survive the test of time, all thanks to this one ancient gateway. The power granted by whatever lived on the other side of the gateway materialized as nightmare fuel. Probably not known as that back then, or the ancients would have been a little bit more reluctant on using it. This fuel has magical MacGuffin powers and was seemingly able to manifest into whatever it wanted, but more notably, when combined with a strange orange rock composed of salt and moth dust, could be fashioned into strong tools and armour, giving the ancients superiority over whatever lived in the caves or on the Constant with them at the time, like these giant centipede looking things which they were forced to give offerings to. I'm super glad we don't see those in game nowadays and just have big evil worms instead. Anyway, with all this dark shadowy magic granted strength to an almost lost civilization, what could possibly go wrong? Well, the people started to lose their skin. This ancient race of bug people would eventually and slowly lose parts of their skin and bodies, revealing shadowy limbs and protrusions inside of their shells, as well as their spines extending on their back. Whatever individuality and humanity they may have had was stolen away from them. They typically most likely wore masks before this whole transformation, but as seen in the murals, they either shed these pseudo faces as well or ditched wearing a mask altogether when this metamorphosis happened. You'd think the whole losing their skin part and slowly devolving into a shadowy monster would be the end of their civilization. You'd be mistaken. The discovery of the ancient gateway, its patron, and the nightmare fuel found within didn't just save the civilization from extinction, it thrust it into a black and orange golden age. Massive strides in technology, food conjured from shadows all around them, and possibly even the ability to return to and repopulate the surface. And all of this for nothing more than losing a little bit of themselves. The cane-bearing leader was proud of what his people had become, but the torchbearer? They had a level of reservedness for what the future may hold for this booming race. As time went on, things went from good to great to awful. The once proud race of ancients leaned on their shadowy substance way too much, relying upon it for everything and anything in their life, to even the bodies that they were made from. It wasn't difficult when the shadowy patron, The eye that we've seen leading the Inkblights nowadays grew impatient, frustrated, or even bored of the race that was using its power, and acted its final stage of metamorphosis on the Ancients. It removed their individuality entirely, shedding the last bits of shell and skin that they still had, and turning them into what might be the exact same shadow monsters we still see lurking the halls uncountable years into the future. Could this have been what their patron wanted from the very start? Get the civilization complacent, give them what they wanted, taking bits and pieces of them one bite at a time until you can peel the curtain off and assimilate them all at once. The torchbearer, who in the past was seen being reluctant and reserved about these changes befalling their people, acted out in a wave of desperation and tried to push the shadowy influence back into the gateway where it once came from. They used the powers of their torch, thronging with a potent white flame, and it worked. The gateway was broken, and most likely any connection directly to them was severed. However, as for the torchbearer, they were most likely slain during this event, leaving the Canebearer a solitary leader of a civilization of shadows, a society that they helped rebuild and tear down. They became the king of nothing. As for why these two never shed their skins is unknown. Maybe the shadows wanted them in their existing forms for leadership purposes, or perhaps they already shed their skin a long time ago, but merely hid it under their garbs and masks. What happened next may shock you. The former king of the Ancients would wallow in their ruins, surrounded by shadows of their people. Time would pass. Years? Hundreds of them? Thousands? Millions? Until the survivors we play as happen across fossils hidden in the rocks in the caves. They construct the fossils into a skeleton, and with an atrium, brought life back to the skeleton, now known as the Ancient Fuel Weaver. The same skeleton that we saw the Canebearer raising all those years ago. But if we look at what it says, my world, threadbare, my city, in tatters, leads heavy credence to the Fuel Weaver being the king. In one last act of desperation, he was able to secure his soul, his atrium, in the vessel he raised long ago. He asks for their power one last time, as he wants to shut the gateway. He's been living a life of regret for so long, and now wants to destroy the gateway once and for all, so another fool won't come along and try to exploit it. I recognize your arrogance. I possessed it myself. The Fuel Weaver is the Canebearer. As for the Torchbearer, we'll talk about what happened to her later. Her death was not the end. The story I told you today can be found by doing the Mephius puzzles, as well as inspecting the stones found around the atrium, the heart of the ruins. I strongly recommend doing the Mephius puzzle since you can earn some free skins by doing so, and some good lore. Just make sure to do the Cyclone puzzles first, and to bring a friend. But how did all of this come to pass? What even was this ancient gateway? Was it built by another older race of ancients underneath the existing ones? Do we have like 2 layers of ancients to deal with? Well, not at all. In fact, the ancient gateway itself, the thing responsible for everything, not just the rise and fall of the ancient civilization, but the entire reason the shadows have their eye on the continent to begin with, could have been made by the ancients themselves. Or more specifically, the Torchbearer. Oh yeah, it's DST Theory Time. So I've already done a video explaining who the monarchs were in my Who is Mephius video, but in case you haven't seen that video yet, I'll just quickly go over it again. Now I know I've been calling them Torchbearer and the other monarch the Canebearer, but that's simply because we don't have any concrete evidence on what their names are. Well, that's not the entire truth. We know one of them is called Mephius and is female, however which one is Mephius isn't fully known. Or is it? Remember what I said earlier, that the Fuel Weaver is the ancient king? One of the Fuel Weaver's quotes is that they wish to shut the ancient gateway for Mephius. This probably means that the Torchbearer is Mephius. The king, the Fuel Weaver, wants to undo his hubris, just like the Torchbearer, Mephius, wanted. There's also some cultural evidence too, with Mephius' name being a shortened version of Prometheus, a titan from Greek mythology who stole fire from the gods and gave it to mankind. Seems a bit familiar, doesn't it? A more recent, well, in a relative sense at least, addition to the Caves of the Constant is a place we now know as the Ancient Archive. A place that was hidden from Maxwell initially during his reign, and even Charlie for a long time, only revealed thanks to a large chunk of the moon crashing down into the land itself and forming an underground land bridge to the formerly sealed Vaults of Knowledge. The archive resembles the ruins themselves, but in a more pristine condition. A lot of these statues and surroundings are more kept than the ones in the exposed ruins, and as well as a lack of cobwebs, is a lack of another crucial component: nightmare fuel. As you can see from some of the survivor quotes for certain slates found within the archive, this place's construction most likely predates the discovery of nightmare fuel, and by extension, the construction of the ruins themselves. We can even find husks of robots that manage to resemble the centipedes found in the ancient murals. Maybe they're a religious icon, or made in the image of a now long extinct creature, or maybe even the centipedes in the murals are these robots. This place functioned as some sort of research lab or library many years ago, obviously to the name, where I believed a certain something or even someone was able to research on something in particular, and that something probably included solutions to their civilization's downfall. There's plenty of scrolls found lining the walls, and even fonts of knowledge that house, well, knowledge for highly advanced technologies, like the fabrication of fuel sight, devices to track lunar artifacts, and even the most potent knowledge known to man, the ability to make dirt. Wait, hold on, wind that back a little bit, Ash. Fuel sight? The fact that fuel sight was made here is a massive discovery, since even the atrium itself, the very heart and core of the ruins, probably the oldest part of the ruins itself, the initial statues were not made out of fuel sight. Just more evidence we need that this place is older than the ruins. Anyway, in this place we can see statues, imagery, and even furniture itself made out of moon rocks. The research that was done here was mainly focused on the moon itself. But if that's the case, then why did the civilization end up relying on the shadows? Didn't you just say, Ash, that they built the ancient gateways? Well, yeah, I think that the research of the ancient gateway was founded here, as some sort of antithesis to the moon, to Alta. They were not able to discover ways to use the moon's power to save themselves, but they were able to discover through Alta that an opposite power was founded way beneath their feet, and was able to be communicated with via the gateway. The confirmation for this is simple. In one of the animated shorts, we can see Charlie perusing the vaults for knowledge on how to rebuild the ancient gateway, and guess what she finds? Blueprints to the ancient gateway. The entire archive predated not only the discovery of nightmare fuel, but also the discovery of the ancient gateway. Now I suppose now is a better time than any to talk about the elephant in the room, huh? How was Charlie able to find all of this knowledge that she did? Was she simply coming across Mephius' knowledge by looking hard enough? No. Now it's time we talk about the fate of Mephius, the torchbearer. You see, after she was struck down by the shadows when trying to close it, something happened to her. Her body may have died then and there, but her spirit, her shadow, that lives on. Where exactly? Inside Charlie. If we look back at the stage play, for a full rundown of that, check out my Charlie video, it's heavily alluded to that Charlie was offered a gift by a mysterious entity at the time that I believed was them, the big shadow eye, Tenebra. However, I was wrong. The gift, the power she was given, was Mephius. She gave Charlie the ability to dwell in the dark, harness the shadows, but more importantly, she gave her the exact research she made on the gateway herself, as well as the torch. How else was she able to obtain it? How else was she able to attain the blueprints, her knowledge on the gateway? As we all saw in that latest animated short, Mephius is literally Charlie's shadow. But why? Why is Mephius helping Charlie rebuild the cursed thing she wanted to originally destroy? It depends on how much free will Mephius has at this point. Is she a pawn of the shadows, forced to use her knowledge for Charlie's bidding? Or are there plans more grand than that? To find a way to harness the shadow's powers once and for all, and strike back against it somehow? Time as always will tell. But my evidence doesn't just end there. In the initial murals I showed you at the start, you can see them showing a level of reluctance to the shadows even from the very beginning, and even how the portal on their torch share the same white coloration, implying that both the magic the portal and the torch use could be lunar magic. The reluctance that Mephius is showing, guilt for founding this power themselves, or fear in knowing what potential it truly holds. There is one small hole in my theory, however. Well, less a hole in my theory, but more so something that complicates things. You see, the statues seen in the Lunar Archive show the ancients without a mask or a face, kinda like the ones shown in the atrium, which makes sense since they predate those. But why in certain murals do we see ancients with faces? Well, it's possible that the ancients never had a face, and always wore masks for ceremonial purposes, with the only reason for them being unmasked in the murals depicting them as a shadowy form was to showcase just that. Maybe the statues in the archive are maskless not because they're shadows, but because that's how they really look. Never a face, but a mask instead. The whole business with the mask enemies in the latest update, however, do make the whole mask symbolism more relevant than ever. But that's not too important for the continuity of my theory. My point is that the torchbearer, Mephius, conducted research into the moon and the strange rocks it produced on occasion, only to turn up nothing, except the discovery of a greater power. They took this knowledge and either constructed the ancient gateway themselves, or rebuilt it, or even found it. Then, with the cane bearer by their side, used the discovery of the power with the ancient gateway to, well, write history, I suppose. Time would pass, the kingdom would rise and fall, until Mephius would meet her reflection, Charlie. The parallels between Charlie and Mephius, and Maxwell and the cane bearer, are massive. The ancient gateway, however, it's made out of dreadstone. Or well, it at least needs it to function. How were they able to get their hands on such a material when the only time the thing appears is when the gateway is already active? This either proves to us that the gateway itself already existed prior to its discovery, and that it was in fact not constructed by the ancients, merely activated, or that they were able to somehow harvest dreadstone outcroppings from the layers below, since it's a safe assessment to make that these shadows dwell beneath the surface thanks to how shadow rifts and nightmare fissures function. This also implies that these shadows could have existed in some form before the gateway's activation, but maybe perhaps in a more primitive state, sealed below the surface. How the ancient gateway itself came to be is no matter in the grandest scheme of things. What matters is that the ancients discovered its use in secret long before they were able to exploit it. Or should I say, before it was able to exploit them. Mephius had valid reasoning to be wary of the cane bearer's reliant use of the gateway's power. However, it was most likely their own fault for the blasted thing to be used to begin with. Maybe they were too afraid to tell the cane bearer its true power. Maybe they thought it wouldn't happen. Maybe they couldn't tell them. Who knows? Now all that's left is a dusty archive, a city bustling with the howls of unlife, and the gateway, waiting for its next set of victims to try and exploit its power once more. But that's all we have to say about the ancients, at least for now. Maybe as time goes on we'll learn more about this elusive group of magic abusing bugs. I hope you all enjoyed this video. It was a crazy theory, most likely filled with a million billion holes, but I'm confident in the general gist of it all. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye bye everybody.